Muy buenas, seguidores de Max Metal. Hoy nos encontramos en el hotel donde se hospedan Helix, la famosa banda de hard rock de los 80, los canadienses, los cuales van a actuar hoy en el Rockfest Barcelona. Hoy nos acompaña su vocalista y líder, señor Brian Bolmer, a quien vamos a tener el placer de entrevistar. Hi Brian, and welcome to Barcelona.
Nice to be here.
How is your stay going so far?
Yesterday we went out in the town and went down to Ramblas and had a great time.
Okay.
I always love Barcelona. I love Spain.
Yeah. Have you done some tourism all these days?
No, just this one date this time around, but we've been here before. 1983 was the first time with Kiss, and we played Barcelona, San Sebastian, and Madrid. And then in 2014 we came through Spain again, and I think we played Pamplona, Madrid, and Barcelona. But it's always nice to come back. It's a beautiful country, and
Yeah.
we love it.
Yes, it is. Well, now we are in the context of a great festival with bands like Def Leppard and King Diamond and Saxon and all this kind of stuff. Helix has been playing for 45 years right now. Did you ever think that in 2019 these kind of great festivals would still be counting on you?
Well, I didn't really think about it that much, to tell you the truth. But in 2014, we came through the clubs, and clubs isn't really a good place to see the band because I think we're a concert act. And the problem with clubs, whether it be North America or Europe, is that you go in and you always look smaller because you're on a small stage, and sometimes the PA and lights aren't the best. But when we played Sweden Rock, we realized we need to get back into Europe on a concert stage. We've done 3 or 4 tours here, I think, over the years, and that's the best place to see the band. Because in Sweden, especially, we went back. We played Rock Klassiker live in I think about 2017. Then we came back and we did Sweden Rock, and the band did well at both shows. So when we were offered this show from our agent, we thought it was a great opportunity to come back and play on a big stage so people could still see that we had it, and hopefully we'll ace the show this afternoon.
Okay, so one question I wanted to ask you was about the creation of the band, because as far as I'm concerned, it was formed to participate in a kind of a contest.
Yes, that's true.
Well, tell us about that. How was that story?
Well, we were from Kitchener, Ontario, and there was a small fair there called the Central Ontario Exhibition. You had a battle of the bands, and the first year we got in, I was in a little band from Listowel, Ontario, and we didn't do too well because we weren't very good. But through that, we met some other guys, and the next year we entered and we won the competition. And then from there we went on the road and we played in Northern Ontario, and then Eastern Canada, Western Canada, and finally we got a record deal. So just goes to show you never give up.
Yeah.
Because the first year we were written right off with that talent contest when we came back.
Okay, that's great. Well, I'm sure today we'll have the chance to hear the old hits like Rock You, for instance.
Yes.
I think that the idea of this song was like quite simple,
Yes.
the Rock You. But sometimes I think that the simplest ideas are the most effective, don't you think?
I think so because there's a old expression, stadium rock, and what that means is when you're playing a big arena, if you get too dicey, in other words, you got a million things happening on stage out front in a big boomy arena, it sounds like like that. So we always wrote that kind of music anyway. We grew out, you're always a product of the cover songs you played before you played originals. And we were in Aerosmith and Kiss and all those bands, so our music became a product of what we were listening to, which was a simpler type of music, right? I think it's hard to write a simple song, sometimes more so than a real complicated song. Not always, but simple's hard to write because what hasn't been done.
Yeah, and you have to take a look at the audience. What are they looking for?
Yes.
Well, in contrast with this kind of more like party songs, Helix used to be great at writing love songs too.
Yes.
Like Without You, Tip Cuts the Knife, Good to the Last Drop, and to name a few. It is said that during the 80s it was mandatory to include at least one love song in every album to make it more commercially successful. Was it also true for Helix?
Well, I think we always put a slow song on the album, but it wasn't so much to sell the album as much as it was the fact that we wrote slow songs, and we didn't want too many slow songs, so we always usually chose the best one to go on the album. We have quite a few actually slow songs, the ones you mentioned, and then there's Make Me Do Anything You Want, Without You, there's a whole whack of them. So, but you know, when you have a catalog of 170 songs, I think it is now, there's bound to be a few slow songs.
Yeah. Helix had also a song called It's Too Late, which was featured in the action film Iron Eagle back in the day. I don't know why, but there used to be a kind of a special connection between 80s hard rock and 80s music in general and this kind of movies, they perfectly match one with the other, don't you think?
Well, and the reason being is back then when the big labels were around, the big labels were in contact with the movie companies, and so they make deals to get the music on those soundtracks, and then they put together compilation albums. So, for instance, if Capital EMI, in Iron Eagle, for instance, when we had, I believe it was This Too Late in Iron Eagle, they'd have a whole, every song on the movie soundtrack would be pretty much a Capital song, and then they'd be in charge of putting together the album for the movie, and the movies would actually put out like an Iron Eagle soundtrack, and so there'd be a lot of Capital EMI product on there. So it was kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, they made sure that their own acts were obviously put on the soundtrack.
Great. There was a really nice hard rock scene in Canada during the 80s with Helix, April Wine, Triumph, Elias, Honeymoon Suite, all this kind of stuff. But the main hot spot for this kind of music was in LA, in the United States. Was it hard to stand out between the great amount of bands that were coming out from the United States?
Was it hard to compete with that?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think it was hard to compete just because, you know, everything's times 10, you know. Canada has 10 times less population than the United States. But from a more practical level in Canada, we had huge distances between the cities. Like to travel from where we are in London, Ontario, and go to, say, Thunder Bay, Ontario, it's like a 23-hour drive.
Wow.
So, whereas in the States, in the state of Ohio, you could play Dayton, Cleveland, Toledo. You had there was short distances to drive. So, just from a money standpoint, because, you know, it's obviously a lot cheaper to drive to the other side of the street than the other side of the country. And so, you know, we were up against that, long touring schedules. But on the other hand, it made us tougher because we were used to those long drives and, you know, living on very little money and things like that. So it made us tougher. But I don't know. I guess I don't like to whine about it, but I think that a lot of Canadian bands, it was pretty tough for us.
Yeah. Well, some weeks ago, I came across on YouTube a video that you recorded for a song complaining the fact that Gene Simmons stated that rock was dead. It was a funny video clip.
Well, I was writing with Sean Kelly at the time, and we're always discussing different song titles we can use, and I had said to Sean, I want to write a song kind of like Steve McQueen, you know, Steve McQueen song, where you use a famous person's name in the title of the song, and it just happened that Gene came out with that interview. I know Gene, we get along great. Well, I knew him anyway. And so I thought it would be a cool idea for a song, so Sean and I wrote the song.
Mr. Simmons may be wrong so far, but the great rock and metal bands of all time are not supposed to last for very long. Do you think that new generations will be able to keep rock music alive, really?
I hope so. You know, they're pretty tough. I say to my young, because I teach voice, I teach singing. And I say to my young guys, I don't know how they do it because there's no bar circuit left. The bar circuit in North America, I don't know about Europe, but in North America, it was where bands trained to be better at their craft, to be better guitar players, better singers, better drummers. And not only that, but to mature as people, because when you're out there on the road week after week, day after day, you know, a lot of people just couldn't handle it and they bailed out. So most bands back in the 80s, we'd spend 3, 4, 5 years, you know, doing that and maturing as individuals, maturing as musicians and performers, develop their craft, so that when we did hit the big time, we got that big record deal, we were ready for it. Nowadays, bands have nowhere to play. They play once a month. You know, suddenly they get a record deal and they got to do 3 days in a row, and they get, you know, they rip the snot out of their voice.
It's a pity.
You know, they're not used to the rigors of the road, and you know, sometimes they self-destruct. You know, you see this all the time with young bands. They can't handle the pressure. Whereas we went into it gradually. So back to your original question, can young bands continue? I hope so. I have a young guy right now that comes to me for vocal lessons, and I went and saw him play with Danko Jones. You know Danko Jones? And I was just blown away. I couldn't believe how good this kid was, and he only played like once a month. And I asked him, I said, how do you do it? He said, well, it's hard, but you know, somehow they do it. So, you know, I think if the desire is there, anything's possible.
Well, let's hope they can keep rock music alive in the future. Helix has just released a new album called Old School this year.
Yes.
How would you describe this new album for the people who have not listened to it yet?
Well, it's old school, that's for sure. We wrote the songs during the 80s for various albums, mostly for Back for Another Taste. But I think there was such a push at that time to get the big hit single, right, that a lot of these songs were overlooked, which is ironic because some of them sound like they could get airplay nowadays. And they were in my basement on cassette tapes, 2-inch tapes. And when I started cleaning out my house,
has just released a new album called
Old School. Okay. Yeah, the songs came about when I was cleaning out my basement. I come across a lot of songs that were written during the 80s, and songs that were overlooked, that there were great songs. I knew about the songs, I hadn't forgotten about them. My songs are like children. You know, and once you write them, you throw them out there, then they kind of do whatever they want. But I thought that they should see the light of day, especially since Paul wrote a lot of these songs with me. And Paul was a great writer and a great guitar player too, for that matter. And so the album was done in the memory of Paul Hackman, and the album's out. It's getting great reviews, and we're doing one of the songs on stage tonight, coming back with bigger guns. And we hope to do more songs in the future. And I think this album, we're going to work it at least till the end of the year. So I'm hoping for big things for that.
That's right. So now that the band has released a new album, which are the band's future plans?
The next album is going to be with the lineup I have now, because Caleb really wants to put out an album and put his stamp on it. And I know Daryl's into producing, and I found that out by Old School. He did a great job on that album. So I'm going to do it with the guys in my band. They deserve it. You know, during the 90s, I had a very transient lineup in the band. I was struggling just to keep going. And so, you know, you hire these, you know, rental players just so you can play live, and because you have to have money coming in. You know, people forget that, you know, it's a business, and, you know, to make music, you got to have money to make music. It takes a lot of money, and, you know, basically all the money I made, I was putting back into the band, trying to keep it going, and I kind of squeaked through, and, you know, now that we're to this point again, and I got a solid lineup, you know, Caleb's been in the band over 10 years, Chris has been in the band since 2014, of course, Fritz and Daryl have been there forever, so it's time to make an album and let them be a big part of it. Up to this point, I've been very guarded, you know, with putting together the albums. You know, some of the guys left, and then I had, like I said, transient players, and I just didn't want to put together an album and then, you know, by next year have everybody changed. You know what I mean? It confuses the fans. So, but now we get a steady lineup, and we're going to put out an album with those guys.
That's great. And finally, as you said, you're not only a musician, you're also a bel canto teacher.
That's correct. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I didn't know.
Well, that's an interesting story. In 1976, I was diagnosed with nodes or polyps in my vocal cords. And polyps are like a callus. Yeah. And once you get that polyp on your vocal cord, basically you can't sing anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was sent by my manager at the time to a guy named Edward Johnson, who was the youngest member of the New York Metropolitan Opera, but he was an older man when I went to him. And he took me aside and said, look, just study with me and your nodes will go away. And so I studied with Ed, and in 1 year my throat got better. I didn't take any time off from singing. And then in 1989, I was nearly homeless. I had all my belongings in a suitcase. I had gold and platinum albums, and I was basically living on the street. And I went back to Ed, and I said, can I be a teacher? He says, yeah, I'll teach you to be a teacher. And so for the next, 15 years, I used to go back every week. I'd drive all the way up to Fergus, Ontario. It took me 3 hours to drive up, and I'd take my lesson, drive 3 hours all the way back. And I did that almost every week for 15 years. And I became a teacher, and I slowly started teaching the bel canto technique. But the big secret behind the technique is the active inhalation, which is taking breath into your head as you're singing. And there's a very important reason to do that, which would take me 2 hours to explain. But the technique was started by Leonardo da Vinci, and primarily used by Spanish and Italian singers. It's the only way to sing without doing damage to your vocal cords.
Yeah. That's right. So, well, that's the end of the interview.
Bob, can I just say something
okay.
right now?
Yeah.
I taught the girls from Kitty, Morgan and Mercedes Lander came to me. They didn't want to change the sound of their voice. They wanted to be able to sing night after night and not lose their voice. I've taught Tim Hicks, who's a country star in Canada. He's had 3 or 4 top 10 country hits. And the guy that taught me, Edward Johnson, he taught Gilmore of Triumph, Annie Kern of Coney Hatch. He taught me, and just literally hundreds of singers that became successful, right? So the proof is in the pudding, as they say. You know, to see whether or not a technique is good or a vocal teacher is good, you should look at their students. And both myself and Ed Johnson had very successful vocal students. So I think that's a testament to the technique.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so thank you very much, Brian. That's the end of the interview. We would like to thank you very much for attending Max Metal. And well, if you want to say hello to our readers, please go ahead at the camera.
How you doing out there? And I would like to thank everybody for tuning in to Mark's Metal today, and to thank Mark and his lovely assistant over there with the camera. And thank you, Spain, for having us back.
Okay.